Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
Welcome back to another edition of the Disney Dish Podcast with Jim Hill. It's me, Len Testa, and this is our show for the week of Schmurz Day, July 28th, 2025. On the show today, Disney announces a new attraction. In listener questions, if travel is down, why is it so hard to find a cheap Disney hotel room in December? Then in our main segment, it's the second half of our interview with Don Hahn and Chris Merritt on their fabulous new Disneyland book, The Happiest Place on Earth. Let's get started by bringing in the man who's seen your dating life and says you should be in law enforcement because you're both chasing the same boys and you might as well get paid for it. It's Mr. Jim Hill. Jim, how's it going?
Len, it is going well. And I'm just going to say this. I am so happy I am not out there as part of today's dating scene because I just could not hack it in a swipe left, swipe right world. I mean, no. I don't have a face that invites swiping. In fact, whenever my visage appears on somebody's iPhone these days, the first thought typically is, wow, when you get up close, walruses are really ugly.
My God, there's something wrong with my screen. And they're like frantically trying to clean off the glass.
That's right.
Nope,
that's right.
Nope, it's not it. Nope.
On the other hand, I got lucky. My bride had a fondness for large aquatic mammals. And when it came right down to it, mid-90s, it was between me and a manatee with money.
Yeah.
Caught a break.
Through perseverance, you lucked out. Yeah, exactly.
There we go. 28 years together this September.
Oh, muzzle tough, you crazy kids.
There we go. All right.
Here we go. All right. Jim, let's do a quick shout out to our subscribers. Thanks to everyone who subscribed to the show over at patreon.com/JimHillMedia, including Murray Conway, Michael D'Alessandro, Mary Phelps, Sean Crossman, Ryan Heath, and Amy Volsky. Jim, these are the cast members just found in a remote office deep inside Spaceship Earth, waiting patiently at their AT&T World Key terminal since 1994 for the next guest to make a video call for dining reservations in World Showcase. Also discovered with these folks is their supply of caffeine-free Tab soda, the world's only remaining supply. Look for that at an upcoming Van Eaton Galleries auction soon. True story.
Wow. All right. You win. That was the better
World
story.
Key terminals.
Wow.
We're doing Geo82. Why not? All right.
Yeah. Okay.
On to the news. Folks, the Disney Dish News is sponsored by UnlockedMagic.com from our friends at the DVC rental store. As you know, Jim, Touring Plans tracks ticket prices for both Disney and authorized third-party wholesalers. And the site with the absolute best ticket deals right now is UnlockedMagic.com. With savings up to hundreds of dollars versus buying from Disney. And as a bonus, they now have discounts on Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party tickets, which Disney never discounts.
Wow.
So check them out at unlockedmagic.com. Yeah, I didn't even think that was possible. Okay, all right. All right, Jim, every show should begin with a round of self-congratulations. And Jim, on our July 9th Patreon exclusive show, you said a redo of the Magic of Disney animation was in the works at Hollywood Studios with, quote, 4 or 5 smallish exhibits and films inside of an air-conditioned space. And Jim, verily, it came to pass last week that Disney announced that Star Wars Launch Bay would be closing to make way for an attraction called The Magic of Disney Animation, with 5 small exhibits and a film. So one of them is Living Portraits, where portraits will come to life as characters that interact with visitors. The Drawing Studio Sketch, so you get to draw characters with the help of animators. Character Meets and Greets. Drawn to Wonderland, which is a new indoor play area designed for kids, inspired by Mary Blair's concept art for Alice in Wonderland. And then a short film experience, where you get to view a short film with interactive elements. So the last day for Star Wars Launch Bay is September 24th. Congratulations, Jim, on getting that one completely right on what has to be just a wild guess, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, a couple of things. It's not just what's going on in the building that's worth noting. The Animation Courtyard, that space between the revived Mermaid Show, Playhouse Disney, as well as the old Star Wars Launch Bay, is getting a reimagining as well.
Right, the whole space is, And Disney Junior's closing.
Well, yeah, but remember, that's worth noting in and of itself because remember, what is it, 2027, we're getting our Bluey movie that will be released by Disney, and don't be surprised if we see big-time Bluey stuff over there. But that courtyard, that sea of cement that's been there forever, they're pulling down the studio arch and they're putting in, well, if you've ever driven onto the Disney lot in Burbank, it's literally the sign, they're replicating the sign right off the street, off of Buena Vista Drive. And then lots of mature trees. I mean, they're going to replicate the campus look of the Disney lot out there.
I do note this, Jim, that the Animation Courtyard, if you walk through the arch and you walk towards Star Wars Launch Bay, just before you get to Launch Bay, on your left is a sign for an old store, and it's one of the few remaining examples of Disney MGM Studios graphic design from park opening with the, that bold red, the primary color red with the black and the yellow. That's like one of the last remaining pieces of the studio. I hope that gets into the archive somewhere.
As well. Also, want to give credit where credit is due here. I was talking with our pal from Disney Impact, veteran Imagineer Jim Schul yesterday, and in regard to that Drawn to Wonderland thing, the indoor playground, what Mr. Schul thinks is going to happen is, well, first of all, there's 3 different components of this area. And what they're most likely going to do is drop this aspect of this indoor attraction where the old fishbowl was. Remember you stood up on a certain level and looked down into where the animators were looking? Okay, picture this, you're a parent standing on the upper level looking down into where your child is playing among Mary Blair-esque slides and spinners and that sort of thing.
It warms the heart, Jim. It warms the heart.
Well, but more to the point, it's also, you don't have to make all that many changes to this pre-existing space. And that's, I think, the other thing we need to stress here about the magic of a Disney animation redo, the thing that'll be opening in 2026. This is very much a use the physical plant that's already there. They're going to try to use as much of the old animation tour as they possibly can here, because the thinking is that this is literally kind of a patch on a bad tire, that this will be what this side of the park will be for about a decade.
10 years, really that long?
Well, now think about it. The way Disney, especially the Disney parks in Florida work, we're in the middle of a moment where work has already begun on Cars Road Alley, and after that, Villains Land. Likewise, there's work already well underway in the tropical Americas, Encanto Land thing. And so the studio, the big thing at the studio, at least for the foreseeable future, will be the Monsters, Inc. land. But 5 years after that, they will be looking for, well, what else can we do to the park to get people to come back? And they looked at doing something with animation prior to deciding, okay, it's Muppets that goes down and we're building out in the parking lot.
Yeah, you and I have talked about this, because I think you and I heard a couple of different proposals for long-term plans for Animation Courtyard. And both of those, I think, involved putting various unrelated animated franchises in the area, though with one exception, both of them had different IPs. And we did hear that Bluey was one of the franchises mentioned for Animation Courtyard. So I guess if Bluey goes in there, that would, and there's a Bluey movie coming in 2027, that would give them, 5 years. Yeah. So that would bring us to like 2032.
And remember that Bluey is going to most likely go into the Playhouse Disney space, which, more to the point, that's going to maintain its same physical setup. But the only difference is the placemaking that's done in the area with the benches and the full-size trees and that sort of thing. I mean, same physical plant, just different look. But yeah, I mean, all of this takes its inspiration from the Disney animation 100-year thing, Once Upon a Studio, and should be charming as hell.
No, it looks fantastic. I mean, and I know there's stuff that you know about this coming attraction that we can't talk about just yet.
Not yet.
the stuff that we've talked about offline looks to be super promising. I'm super excited for it as well. All right, so so that means then that at least for the next 10 years, we're probably not going to see a connection between the back of Animation Courtyard and Sunset Boulevard.
That's the other thing. The admin building is back there. And just the whole notion of there's going to be so much disruption at the studio over the next 5 years with having to reroute the perimeter road and building out in the parking lot for Monsters, Inc. The notion was just let admin do its job. And then in 10 years, when that side of the park is fully developed and they've retooled Star Wars Land so it actually has characters people want to see in it, right. Then you pivot your attention to, okay, let's address this issue finally and connect the Animation Courtyard to Sunset Boulevard. But future project.
Yeah.
But in theme park, if you measure in theme park time, the 2030s are minutes away.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we have to start planning for this now, right? Yeah.
There we go.
Okay, so a normal refurb takes, 12 to 18 months. Let's look at that time range. Are we expecting Magic of Disney Animation to open in late 2026, early 2027? Do we have a sense of that yet, or do we just not know?
Well, you've nailed it. This is closing on September 25th of this year. All right. So realistically, they have 16, carry the 2, drop the 4, 15 months for it to be completed by 2026. So right. That's kind of ambitious. So I know they've announced 2026, but don't be so surprised if this slides.
Oh, so they did say 2026. I didn't see an actual date.
They did.
Okay.
But like I said, 15 months for what they're planning on doing here between just the work in the courtyard and then changing some of it is just cladding.
Yeah, but then you run into we found asbestos, or this isn't up to ADA code. So yeah, I mean, Jim Shula said on shows before that you don't really know some of that stuff till you get in with the hammers. Okay, fair. All right, so September 24th, October 1st is the start of Disney's fiscal 2026. So we may not see this till fiscal 2027, which would be October 1st.
Yeah, I would honestly be not surprised at all if the opening of this slid to first quarter of 2027, maybe even the spring. But it'll be worth it. It'll be worth it. Hang in there, folks.
Yeah, it looks like fun. And if Bluey is the thing that replaces Disney Junior, I mean, Disney Junior's had a 20-year run in various forms. Good enough, right? I mean, that it's done what it had to do. Okay, fair.
Well, but more to the point, Bluey is actually a Playhouse Disney fixture. So it's Playhouse Disney involving Bluey. What a surprise. Oh, by the way, if you want to learn more about the Drawn to Wonderland, and it's actually its connection to something that Bruce Bushman designed for the original Disneyland more than 70 years ago, you might want to check out Jim Schul's Disney Journey later this week, which will show off some concept art from a walkthrough version of the Alice in Wonderland thing that was planned for Disneyland.
I'll throw a link in the show notes then.
Okay, cool.
Also, I want to point out that when we talked about the proposals that both of us have heard for the plans for Animation Courtyard or on the unrelated animated franchises, with one exception. The one exception is both of the plans that I had heard had some version of the Electric Mayhem taking over the theater space behind Rock and Roller Coaster for the Unfairly Ever After show once Villain's Land opens in the Magic Kingdom. So that would be a place for kids to see the Mayhem kids who are too small to see Rock and Roller Coaster, still see the Mayhem. But interestingly, I looked at the survey results that we're getting for both the new Mermaid show and the Villain show, and they're both very highly rated. Like every demographic gives both of those shows 4.5 stars out of 5.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, which is really good for those shows. Yeah, I mean,
I agree.
The Mermaid, I mean, Lightning McQueen did not do that well. The old Mermaid show did not do that well. So, I mean, Disney seems to have hit the right notes when it comes to those stage shows. So yeah, if we add in Bluey, we add in a Magic of Disney Animation, this could be a relatively quick and, more importantly for Disney, a relatively inexpensive redo of that space.
By the way, speaking of inexpensive, but intriguing. I don't know if you saw just in the past week or so, villains have started popping up in weird places around Disney property. I mean, for example, there was video online just earlier this week, for example, of Cruella coming out of a doorway and interacting with guests in the France pavilion at Epcot. In fact, the walkway leading to Ratatouille.
Cruella in France. I thought that was British.
Well, see, now that's where it gets interesting. That supposedly what happened is that Cruella came out and guests interacted with her, and standing off to the side was somebody with a clipboard tablet and a clicker. So they may be doing some work out ahead of Villains Land to get a sense of, okay, who are the guests actually excited to see? And
what does a walk around character have to do? I love this idea. Yeah. Now's the time to experiment.
Okay, there you go.
Fantastic. All right, Jim. Also last week, the Magic Kingdom's new nighttime parade, Disney Starlight, debuted, and it is off to a strong start. Have you seen the videos of this?
I have, and I'm kind of intrigued. In your show notes here, you talk about the outfits for the performers in between the parade floats, which frankly none of the videos to date have done any justice. Because
you've got to see it in person. It's amazing.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah, so the floats are beautiful. They're really well designed. And the fact that one of the things I love about them is, especially for the Peter Pan float, Disney did not constrain itself to just right-angled structures on a float platform. Like it looks like the Big Ben is coming out at an angle from one part of the float. And I'm not sure what the back part of that float is supposed to be. It reminds me, Jim, and you'll appreciate this. Do you remember how distorted the Eiffel Tower was in the old version of Soarin'? It looks like that. Like, is this a tribute to the Eiffel Tower? But in Soarin'?
There we go.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But also, so in between the floats, though, there are parade performers who have these harnesses, and they're carrying small, decorative elements between the parade. And each of the elements is lighted because it's a parade at night. And there are these ones with like purple, yellow, and pink butterflies. Oh. That are just an amazing effect. Before Tiana is shown, there are performers in outfits designed to emulate firefly effects. Really, really well done. Whoever's doing the costuming for that parade, just fantastic job. Also, the floats look great. The color scheme is great. Really well designed. I will note also, and I want to get your take on this, the runtime for the parade is 12 minutes. And I went back and looked. Main Street Electrical Parade and Spectro, the two previous, iterations of parades, were both 20 plus minutes. This one's 12.
Yeah.
And I think, like, here's the thing though. To me, 12 feels right for this parade. So it's a shorter runtime. And so it's fewer floats as well, right? It's also less expensive to develop, but maybe this is the compromise. 12 minutes.
Well, the other thing, and I think you brought this up when they announced how they were reversing the parade route. I mean, I want to say it starts in Town Square and then rolls back to Frontierland and then reverses direction, largely to make it that much easier to stage the fireworks. I was told that was another consideration, especially now between the corrals and that sort of thing up there, how so many people concentrate in that space to see the fireworks show. The notion is get this parade through there. And let's also be honest, you have the people who, as soon as it's possible, step in the middle of Main Street USA so they can have that view of the fireworks over the castle.
Right.
And that this makes that possible.
Oh, right. Good point. Yeah. So you can, this gives you more time if you're going to get positioned for the fireworks in a different spot than the parade to go get that view. But okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I feel like 12 minutes is about my attention span for a parade.
Yeah, but what makes me kind of crazy about this is that this is, think about it. We've seen this happen. We've gone from we were just talking about on the new Disney Unpacked we'll be releasing for Test Track, where 17-minute long experience back in 82.
Yeah.
And now these days, if a ride is 4.5 minutes long, people are like, wow, all right, I need to take a nap after that.
Yeah, got my money's worth on that one, didn't I? Yeah.
There we go.
We're never going to see another 35-minute universe of energy. That's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
All right, fair. All right, Jim, one more bit of news from the parks. Last week, Disney released some new changes to the Be Our Guest menu in the Magic Kingdom. And one of them was adding steak frites. And originally, I thought this was going to be a substitute for the beef tenderloin in the menu. But so far, it looks like an addition. Oh. And I like the addition because steak frites is more flavorful than filet as far as I'm concerned. But just to be thorough here, I checked the USDA's wholesale beef morning sales report. Did you know they have an AM and a PM beef sales report?
Okay.
The things you learn, Jim, the things you learn.
There we go. Okay.
Anyway, tenderloin was selling for 50 to 80% more than the cuts normally called a butcher's cut, which, according to my friends in Disney F&B, would be either flank, hanger, or skirt steak, depending on, what's available. So if this was a swap, that would be a reduction in quality and cost, but it's not. It looks like it's just an addition to that. So I can see my way to that. Also, Disney swapped in Arctic char for trout almondine, and Arctic char is like 50% more expensive than trout. So that was interesting. So I went back and did some research there, and apparently it's Arctic char season through July. So maybe supply is just higher right now and they're going with something seasonal. That would make sense.
I love that you have the information sources to chase down this sort of stuff.
Called a boat for that one.
There we go.
I mean, they had a phone number. They didn't say they were on the boat. They just happened to be on the boat. But anyway.
Okay.
All right. Last little bit of news. Our friend BioReconstruct captured a photo of a Waymo self-driving car on the streets around Universal Orlando recently, and I've included a photo in the show notes. He's actually found 2 of them in that area. And Jim, the other thing I want to point out, besides the fact that Waymo is in Central Florida now, is if you look at that photo of the Waymo car, look how low Bio had to get that helicopter for that photo. That is just fantastic flying.
Wow. Okay. From his days working with the A-Team.
Exactly.
Okay.
I didn't know that you could put an easy pass on a Huey like that, but okay. All right.
Okay.
On to listener questions. Our friend Jill Peter Fesso in Greensboro, North Carolina, writes in with this. I'm headed to Walt Disney World with another Disney Dish listener, Ben Wrench, and the current Mrs. Wrench in mid-December 2025. We have a room at Saratoga Springs for the 13th and 14th, thanks to Ben and his wife's DVC. We're trying to add a third night on December 15th, and we are completely flummoxed by the difficulty in finding a reasonably priced room for that one night of December 15th. Can you help us understand what's going on? So, okay, so I know Jill, and we know the current Wrench spouses. So, hello to spouse of the moment of the current Mrs. Wrench. I went back and I looked, and indeed, the All-Stars are $250 a night for the week of around December 15th, and that is with a current 20% discount because the rack rate is just under $300 a night. Everything I'm talking about here is with tax. That's kind of amazing for a value resort.
I was about to say.
I would have guessed, just based on past prices and inflation, I would have guessed around $200 a night. But one of the issues is this. Orlando, as of today, has seen stronger hotel room demand in 2025, while most of the rest of the country is down. So there's one of the places that I track hotel demand is through this company called STR. It's a hospitality research company. And they note that 2/3 of the United States has seen a drop in hotel demand. So Vegas is not doing well at all, right?
No.
Right? But Orlando and a handful of other cities, like Chicago, are at the top end of the roughly 1/3 of cities that are doing better. And 5 of those cities, including Orlando, account for almost 1/3 of the increase across the 61 markets that are doing better. So Orlando is doing okay. Also, tourist tax collection in Orange County in April and May were strong, with May setting a record, which they specifically said was related to Epic Universe. Cruise passenger numbers out of Port Canaveral still very strong, with Disney's newest ships going out at 90+% occupancy. June numbers are not yet as of this morning. Also, international tourism isn't down as much as you would think. It's only around a 1% drop. There are substantial drops in tourism from Canada and smaller drops from Europe, but those are being offset by big gains from Mexico and Asia.
Wow.
And Florida, in terms of state visitation, ranks number 2 in destination states for international tourists. New York is number 1. So also Disney CFO Hugh Johnson said on the last earnings call that summer hotel bookings were up 4% year over year and fall was up 7%. So there doesn't seem to be a demand drop anywhere in Central Florida. And I'm suspecting that Disney's pricing hotel rooms accordingly. That's my thing. There's no reason to discount hotels because demand is strong.
Dear Lord, this is, I mean, if you think about how we were talking just 3 and 4 months ago about kids eating free and the things that were on the table.
Yep.
We jump ahead now to December and there's this sort of demand. Wow.
Yeah. And it's without anything big opening, which is also kind of amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very surprised. But I mean, you got to believe Disney, with their analytics capabilities, knows exactly which buttons to push to get demand up when they need to. All right, Jim, and here's a question from Nicholas, and it's for you. And it's this. What would happen if someone at Imagineering came up with an absolutely brilliant idea for a killer attraction that was not based on an existing movie or TV franchise? Would it stand any chance at all? Perhaps the storyline itself is integral to the concept, so it's not as simple as come back when you've reskinned this with, whatever movie.
I wish I could be encouraging here, but Nicholas, I will direct your attention to a story that was literally published by the Hollywood Reporter yesterday called Mickey versus Shrek, where it talked about the fact that the parks nowadays it's all about IP 24/7. And in fact, if anything, Universal nowadays is leaning into the Disney playbook. And in fact, there's no clearer example of what's about to happen at Universal Studios Florida. We're losing Rip, Ride, Rocket on August.
An unthemed attraction, yeah.
There we go. And when it comes back right now, depending on who you talk to at Universal Creative, it's either a bigger, larger coaster themed to Back to the Future, or and they're going to take down the supercharged Fast and Furious and use that building as the load unload for this now mega coaster.
So I may have had a peek at some construction plans. The load unload for that is going over where Fallon is.
Really?
Yeah, Jim Schull has
oh dear.
Jim Schull has extra information on that.
Okay, that's intriguing because that doesn't bode well for Fallon. Okay.
No. I think it's on the. I think it goes on or. Yeah, we'll have to ask Jim Schull on it.
Okay.
So well, I had heard Fast and Furious like a couple years ago.
Same thing here.
And it would make sense because they're doing Fast and Furious at Universal Studios Hollywood, right? Spinning coaster. Okay. And then I've also heard Ghostbusters recently. The thing that I'm trying to figure out is I know that they want to replace Fast and Furious in Universal Studios Florida with a Back to the Future attraction. So if they do that, if they replace Fast and Furious, the thing that's where disaster is now, if they replace that with a Back to the Future attraction and they go Ghostbusters on the coaster, where does that leave the Fast and Furious franchise in Florida? Or is it just in Hollywood?
Well, that's where it gets intriguing because as part of this article, the Hollywood Reporter piece, for example, there are folks talking about there are expansion pads just off beyond the existing lands in an Epic universe. And it was suggested, given how well the Wicked franchise is doing.
Right.
I mean, Universal's just getting into the Wicked business, whereas Fast and Furious, we have our 10th grand finale film coming, and it's really telling that it may be time on the heels of the spinning coaster in California. It's like, all right, we're out of that business for now. And if you just look at what's in the works for Frisco, Texas, for the Universal Kids Park, the IPs they're using there, Shrek, Camp Cretaceous, the Trolls, and all that.
Right.
But that's the most interesting thing is that Universal seems to be leaning towards these days stuff we already own, not stuff we need to license. And that's what's particularly telling about Ghostbusters is, yes, there's a historic connection to when the park first opened in 1990. There was the Spooktacular, but that's still an IP you need to franchise from an outside company. And Mark Woodbury, the new head of Epic Experiences and Parks, has flat out said, we have quite a nice portfolio of stuff that's ours that we don't have to license. Why make J.K. Rowling richer?
Right.
So there we are.
The I don't know if we've talked about it in the show, but there is a permitting process underway for what looks to be a theater pad. I think we talked about it on a previous show. A theater pad at Epic Universe. If you're going to the entrance, it would be immediately to the left before you get into Super Nintendo World. And it could be a separate entrance outside of the portals for that. So if they wanted to build a flex space there and do something like a Wicked theater show.
Yeah.
That would make sense for a number of reasons. Number one, to your point, it's a hot property. Number two, it would give people something to do indoors in air conditioning. So in terms of inclement weather or, high temperatures, it's another thing that you can cool down and get away from the elements for. That would make a lot of sense.
And the kicker, Len, is if you Google Universal Studios Japan Wicked, you can see the 25-minute long version of Wicked that used to be presented in that park as a stage show.
Oh, the script's already written.
Yeah.
There we go. Fantastic. All right, we'll have to keep an eye out on that one too.
Okay.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, Jim and I have the second half of our talk with Don Hahn and Chris Merritt about their new book, The Happiest Place on Earth, the incredible story of Walt Disney's Disneyland. We'll be right back.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love, starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
9 años pidiendo el Snack Wrap. Aquí tienes tu Snack Wrap. ¿Tú quieres un Snack Wrap? Toma tu Snack Wrap. ¿Tú también? Toma un Snack Wrap. Snack Wrap, Snack Wrap, Snack Wrap. Volvió el Snack Wrap. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtuo Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your Virtuo Pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
The real genius of this book is, well, you say it straight in the subtitle. This is Walt Disney's Disneyland. In fact, I love that you guys made the story manageable, that you could make it so you could get your arms around it, because this is the story of the park while Walt was alive, the stuff that he touched, that he put in motion. So what would you say? It goes up to 69 or thereabouts? I mean...
Yeah, 69, 70 was the cutoff, right, Don?
A stretch. Yeah, I mean, it certainly slops over his actual passing, but that was from the very beginning. And Wendy and the publishing arm was really supportive of that, because it was a tight fit to fit all this in just from Walt's era, and there could have been another book of equal volume about things that we couldn't include. So just to say we're going to bracket this by Walt's life, it gave it such focus, and also showed the genius of not just Walt, but all the people he pulled into it, and the magnet he was to pull in. He pulled in Renee Conley, who designed and got an Oscar for the costumes on Cleopatra. So he's designing costumes for Elizabeth Taylor, and then comes down and designs the costumes for Disneyland.
That's incredible.
I think that says a lot.
Okay. Or there's like in the Adventureland chapter, there's a I'm fascinated with Oh gosh, the early development of the Jungle Cruise, and there's a photo of Marcel Delgado with a couple of children working on one of the crocodiles for the early Jungle Cruise with Bob Matty, who I think I'm fascinated with Bob Matty. And for your readers who don't know, Bob Matty did all this stuff in Hollywood for years, and he ends up doing Jaws, for Steven Spielberg.
That's right. That's right.
But he does all the early mechanics, for the Jungle Cruise, and has a really hard time getting them to work, much to Walt's consternation. But he has Marcel Delgado come in and do work and do figure finishing. So there's a photo of Marcel Delgado. Marcel Delgado was like an assistant to, maybe not even an assistant, but he worked with Willis O'Brien on King Kong in '33. And so when I saw that, I'm like, oh my God, that's Marcel Delgado. Like, he worked on King Kong in '33. That's incredible. But then when you stop to
what's he doing this ditch in Anaheim?
What's he doing working on the Jungle Cruise in '54 at the Disney ship? But then you stop to think about it. You're like, well, 33, 54, that's not too much long. And then you think, it's a whole ecosystem of people working in the studio system. Sure. Alice Davis called them jobbers, but they're contractors. They're going from job to job. They're working around, right? It's of course it makes sense. They're picking up jobs at whatever studio is hiring, and in '54 they're in early '55 they're hiring up. They got to get Disneyland across the board. So.
Before we leave Jungle Cruise, I want you guys to tell our listeners what the original name was proposed for this ride, because I've never heard it before. And I think this is an example of what happens when you pay the marketing team by the pound.
Well,
yeah, Adventureland was True Life Adventureland was the original name of the land.
Yeah.
And then I think as they're shopping for names for the lands, and this happened in Tomorrowland too. Tomorrowland seems like such a no-brainer, but the name for the ride in Adventureland was the Explorer Boat Ride through the rivers of Mexico, Africa, Central and South America, and Australia. And so it was.
It's like they're preparing for Google search terms.
It's all inclusive and kind of loosely based on the African Queen, and so you get this kind of mashup of things, all in what was a walnut grove, where they're turning the trees upside down to kind of fake a jungle. So they're, again, being incredibly crafty about it all. And while they're searching for the name, while they're searching for the story, to make it entertaining, and doing just astounding things like building Schweitzer Falls and, going down to Newport Beach to try to find a fiberglass boat manufacturer that can do a bunch of boats for him quick. And, so all those things are going on. And Walt's worried about insurance because they're gasoline engines and the guests are going to be sitting around them. And, so there's just practical operation stuff. And then they get a designer, a civil engineer, to come in and say, well, all these waterways can't be disconnected. You have to connect all the waterways in Disneyland, or you're going to have stagnant water everywhere. So all the water in Disneyland, from the moat around the castle to the river in front of Frontierland to the Jungle Cruise to the Rivers of America, which is a huge body of water, is all connected. And when I read that, I thought, I swore. Because you just go, the amount of just simple civil engineering.
More than usual.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting that stuff to work is astounding. Yeah, usually I'm pretty salty, but this was even worse.
Okay.
And it's interesting because that description of like all the continents of the world, and so in the early treatments, first of all, there's someone, did, I think it might have been Ryman, but there's a piece of concept art that did not make it for the book that shows the Jungle Cruise as Australia and all these things. And there's I foolishly, and I failed miserably, I tried to go through every single Dick Irvine interoffice memo at the archives, which, it's tens and tens of thousands of documents.
It was impressive.
But there is a breakdown of all this, and Walt is looking at it, the Jungle Cruise, as like a 45-minute tour, that you're going to go. So this is why Walt is saying, well, let's not do gas-powered boats because they're going to be out there for 45 minutes, and they can't be inhaling all that stuff. And and then at one point he's talking about like reusing the squid from 20,000 Leagues. Is not slated for Tomorrowland. It's slated for the Jungle Cruise. He's thinking, well, Bob Matty can fix up the squid and get it working again out there. It'll be out there in maybe the Australia section or something. I don't know. So it's just, and again, you look at this stuff as a Disney fan, right? And you look at this stuff and like of what it is now and what you grew up with and what and then what they were starting with, and you're like, well, that's nuts. Well, that's so weird. How? But then, like, when you think about a project, or Don, you can probably relate to this from your years in animation, or even the documentaries that you do, or the filmmaking you do now. You start with something, you work it. Well, let's try this. Well, what about this? And at a certain point, if you've got a wacky idea or too wacky, some cooler heads prevail at some point. Go, well, wait a minute, like we can't do that because this, and we can't do that because that, and you eventually work towards reality. And so that's what a lot of these, I'm going to call them crazy pants things are. And I don't want to jump into this. Leads into Uranium Hunt, but I won't jump to that yet because I'm sure you want to talk about that. But like it's
really the highlight of our whole talk. So we can wait.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Yeah. Well, this is a good point, because what I love about the book is you show the process, including the detours. And Disney likes to control the message a lot around the theme parks, understandably so, right? But I think the official version we get of things sometimes is like, here's the Haunted Mansion. The idea sprung fully formed from the minds of Imagineers, right? But the process is what's interesting, and B, it's important to show people, like, this isn't just genius. This is hard work and genius, right?
I don't want to monologue all over everything, Don, but like, one of the things I try to bring to the books that I've done, at least, is a sense of, production and execution in the field. Like, what does it take to actually create these things? Because I feel like the general public, who go to theme parks don't really grok like how much work it is to design, develop, and execute on these ideas, and even putting aside how expensive it is. This is why you're paying so much to get into the parks, folks. But also,
exactly,
it's the just how incredibly difficult. I mean, what Don just said, just dealing with water, which you can't control easily, like gravity, right? Like, it's really, really hard. So like things like even like this book I did on Pacific Ocean Park, which is like a primer on what not to do, like how to make your park go bankrupt in a few years, right?
It's a great part.
So for me, you mentioned Randy Bright's book. So that came out when I was 17, and I didn't really realize I wanted to go into theme park design. But like, I was like, that was the only book, and I was thinking, how do I find out about how to do this design?
Right.
So these books that I work on, I try and put a lot of the design process and a lot of the artists, and try and put some of those stories in, because I want to, like, now I'm the old guy at work, and so I've got a lot of younger designers, and like, how do you do this? How do you stage a show? And that was definitely for the Mark Davis book. It's like, how do you approach this, and how do you work your way through? And then Don, too, I think one of the big goals for us was also to try and like bust a lot of apocryphal stories too, right?
There's a lot of mythology out there about the parks. And I mean, just to go back to your question, I think it's well said. What you're saying, Chris, is the reason these guys are heroes, the reason, Bob Gurr is a hero, isn't because he immediately said, you want a monorail? Here's a monorail. No, it was like the 20 failures and the fact that he was, hijacked the vice president once. And, it's all the stories that go behind it, because the trials and tribulations and failures that go into it make these people even more extraordinary in my eyes anyway. And I love that. I think it's wrong, especially today. And there's great openness at Disney now, thankfully, to talk a little bit more about these people and to say, no, it wasn't easy. They were working around the clock 7 days a week, doing the impossible, building this place in 11 months. It wasn't easy. And I think that's a story that needs to be told more often, because it's the real story.
I mean, there's even that famous quote, which, that Walt Disney's saying, well, it's kind of fun to do the impossible. Well, that story, you hear that quote all the time, but you don't always hear what that story is from. And what that story is from is poor Claude Coates is, designing the Rainbow Caverns, ending to the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train attraction, which is a great favorite of mine.
There we go.
And he's sitting there and he's trying to make literal colored individual, waterfall, slots of water, that look like the colors of a rainbow without them
in water.
In water, right? Which
sure, why not? Why not?
That is dyed water, and it keeps mushing together and turning to gray mud. And this is the time at the studio where they've got Werner von Braun and Heinz Haber and these old ex-German scientists. And I want to say it's Heinz Haber who comes by and looks at it. And he goes, you can't do that. That won't work at all. And he goes, it's impossible.
Very good, Hans Haber, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I studied him for many years.
There we go.
And so he goes, so this is impossible. And and poor Claude is tearing his hair out. He's got to figure this thing out because Walt's depending on it. He's designed this whole incredible cavern show. I relate to this, right? Like, I mean, this is like, you've got a deliverable in 2 weeks and you still don't know how to do this thing. And there are executives that you have to present to, and your butt's on the line if you don't deliver on it. So you don't know what you're going to do. So he's got to present to Walt, so Walt comes by and Claude goes, Walt, I'm trying to make this thing work. And, your scientist, Heinz Haber, says it's impossible. And Walt goes, well, it's kind of fun to do the impossible, isn't it? And walks off. It's like, okay. But you know what? But they figure it out. They come up with little hog's hair bristles to separate the water to keep it from splashing in between each other so the colors stay in the slots. Wow. And that's how they figure it out, with a lot of work and a lot of trial and error. You know what I mean?
They have to figure it out because they're selling tickets, and Walt's on TV every Sunday night telling people that the park's opening in July. So it's not like, when it's ready, we'll open. No, it's opening, and we got to figure it out, and it's got to be great.
And I love that they have to use like real effects here. This isn't one of those things where like we'll fix it digitally in post or whatever.
Rebel, fix it in post.
Yeah, there's no post to fix.
What's also wonderful about, the happiest place on earth is you guys also make these wonderful side trips down things that didn't get built at the park, fully formed ideas. I mean, for example, Rivertown, which a lot of people, the interesting thing, this was announced. I mean, they put up a billboard inside the park and I want to say, wasn't this also the same era of the redo of Storybook Canal? And,
yeah. It's like 56, early 57, Walt is doing billboard advertisements on these storybook-shaped billboards, and we believe it's Art Riley who probably does all the art. There was some confusion because one of the pieces of art is like okayed by Bruce Bushman. So there's like a Bruce Bushman okay, and so for years it was attributed to Bushman, but it's not Bushman's style, and I always kind of questioned it. So I think it's Art Riley, but because it's got that graphic 50s. It looks like gouache to me. But anyway, there's like 4 or 5 of these things where Walt is announcing, there's a Rainbow Caverns one, there's a Storybook Land one, and then this one. Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, and Disneyland opened by the skin of its teeth. So all this stuff was being redeveloped immediately. I mean, he was rebuilding stuff right away. And Rivertown, as you said, they had already started shopping around licensees to sell candles and stuff inside the shops. Yeah, and it would have been absolutely charming, like a little scaled Main Street-esque thing, as though it were a Rivertown either along the Mississippi or on the Gulf. And I think those kinds of things. And you look at the drawings in the book, which are, I think, Ryman's drawings. They're amazing because they're full of charm and they're full of kind of cinema scale and character. But, it didn't work out because things were evolving. Eventually, this might have morphed into, they were thinking about building some things on Tom Sawyer Island. That started to develop. They were going to build miniatures of architecture on Tom Sawyer Island, like Monticello. And here's, some architecture that you drive by on the steamship. And that never happened. And then eventually New Orleans Square kind of popped out, which was something that was there on opening day. There's a street that's still there where you could go, see a little piece of New Orleans on opening day. And so a lot of this Rivertown got thrown by the wayside, but the drawings were so gorgeous. I think one of the things we wanted to do from the beginning was include things that were thought of and lost. And there are whole lands virtually. Rivertown is an example, or parallels to Main Street that were designed to match up with, like a Liberty Square kind of streets that would have been perfect. But for whatever reason, they weren't built. And I think those were as interesting to show as the things that were built.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they really, I mean, there's the International Street, which there was a little model done of, behind Main Street, but then there's the International Land, which kind of was going to take place kind of around where the Matterhorn and the Subs Lagoon ends up.
Motorboat cruise.
And that's even more of like a world showcase thing because it had rides and attractions. Bill Martin did a lot of work on that. And there was like a Swiss Alps ride and a Bavarian, and it's really enticing because there's a plan and they can't find the original art, but it's like, so it's kind of murky, but there's like show buildings and you can see tracks going in and you can almost, but not quite make out some of the lettering. So I'm like, I'm dying to figure out like, well, what was that and what was that going to be?
None of it gets thrown away. It emerges. It comes back as
Right.
something at Walt Disney World or whatever.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I think the fact that they were thinking about this stuff so early is inspiring.
Speaking of things that we see that are fully developed, as somebody who's followed the Great Rock Candy Mountain aspect of storybook canal boats, the fact that you found Oz stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Oz stuff I've never seen before. I mean, where did you dig out the
whole
characters?
thing.
Yeah.
Well,
It's man, the larger question is, where did any of this come from? Certainly the archives at Disney and at Imagineering is spectacular, and this wouldn't exist without them. But there's also collectors and donors and auction houses around the world that have lent things to this book. And so to find something like the Candy Mountain photos and people working on it and kind of unearth things that we've all heard about was so exciting. I mean, I think that's part of it, is just to say, hey, there's this crazy idea that Walt ended up dismissing pretty quickly. And just the story behind it and how the model was put together and how quickly it was dismissed is pretty funny. And the Oz stuff, while we were writing the book, the whole Wicked movie was being made, and we just thought, well, this was all planned on being at Disneyland long, long ago. And Walt was such a fan of the Oz series of books. So to find that artwork and the maquettes that were made for it and everything else, it has existed and been on a shelf for 70 years, and it was great to show it.
We didn't put them in, but they went into some working drawings for it too. In fact, Bob Gurr did one of the mechanical breakdowns and showed it to Bob, and I'm like, Bob, like what, and he's like, I don't know, I don't remember that one. He said, well, but Bob has this incredible logbook that he kept that has every project he ever worked on at the shop with the job like with the project number on it. So that's kind of great for like, he say, well, so he would go like, well, the Oz project was done from this date to this date. And this is something the company doesn't have. Bob just has like at his house. Right.
Oh, wow.
But how did you find that? So I would say for me back, I'm such a nerd. Normal people's lunch breaks, they socialize with people and actually engage in human contact. Not me.
What's that like? I guess.
Imagineering. I would spend my lunch breaks on my computer on the internal art system looking for weird stuff. And so the Oz stuff, I was fascinating. And this goes back to Bruce and Dave's Nickel Tour, because they had a page where they showed a little super, like a postage stamp size black and white photo of a model of Oz, and they kind of talked about it. And I thought, what is this? And and then when we did the Mark Davis book, there was some I still don't fully understand what Mark was doing with some Oz characters and some of his art for Florida, but whatever. Anyway, so I thought, well, we should talk about this. Turns out, Walt buys the rights to every book except for the first one. And as part of this, there's this weird conflagration where he's talking about doing a movie, but he's also doing stuff on the Mickey Mouse Club, but also tangentially, he's doing a thing at the park. And it goes from like 57 until the 60s. And what it is it's not even an attraction, it's a scene in Storybook Land. And so the idea was that as part of Storybook Land, where you'd see all the miniatures, you would go into a cave of sorts. Maybe it was planned for the cave at the far end where the Aladdin cave is now, I don't know. But there would be gates, and the boat operator would say some sort of magical word, and the gates of Oz would open, and you'd go inside, and it would be all the denizens of Oz wishing Dorothy a happy birthday party. They were celebrating her birthday, and all these little figures were going to be about maybe not quite a foot tall. So they if you remember the Minimatronics project, I think it's akin to that. Very simple figures all singing, and they all there was a balloon, all the characters you would imagine. And they hire Joe Rinaldi from the studio to do these beautiful sketches. So he gets hired as after hours, I don't know what you would call that, Don, to just as a freelance gig, but still for the company he works for. So he does like 100 plus of these things. There's so many of these things. Holy cow. They make a little model, and then Fred Jerger and Wathel Rogers start working on this model of it, and then this kind of goes on, and then in the early '60s, Blaine Gibson makes maquettes of them, and then I remember seeing some of those maquettes in an e-ticket magazine. So you put all this together. What is all this? Like you're pulling. This is one of the things I say when you're doing a book on Disneyland or any theme park history. Well, for sure Disney. You can't just go to archives. You can't just go to Imagineering. You've got to go to collectors. You've got to go to auction houses. You've got to go to retired Imagineers. You got to go to Don's house, right? Like you got to go everywhere. And so all this to say, not just the Oz, but there's all these other weird things that we talk about too. There's a Peter and the Wolf scene. There is a Fantasia ride. There is an indoor cave scene that is like the Lost Woods from Snow White, and there's like Babes in Toyland trees. So, and I'm like, what is all this stuff with Storybook Land? Like what? And then I read an interview with Harriet Burns, and she says something to the effect of, Walt was never happy with Storybook Land. He was, and then there's this topiary thing, and there's film footage of Walt showing these topiary gardens dancing. I think we've got a photo of that in there too. So he wasn't 100% happy with it, like a lot of things, like Rainbow Caverns, which he turns into Nature's Wonderland, like Subs, which he has Mark Davis come in and rework all the gags, right? Like Jungle Cruise, he has Mark come in. There's all these things. The Haunted House walkthrough with Ken Anderson, he has another team. He never quite buys it. He's never quite satisfied. He's always pushing forward on these things and trying to improve them and plus them out. Don't you think, Don?
The other thing, Chris, you mentioned is these at the same time he's thinking about television and movies.
Yeah.
So the Oz stuff, was probably percolating as that, or Mouse Club series, or even like Liberty Street. They were doing Johnny Tremaine, the movie, at the same time,
right?
Or the Matterhorn comes out of a movie. So it wasn't just a theme park. It was really deeply founded in entertainment of any sort. And so the ability to say, okay, I'm going to create this attraction, but the spinoff from that's going to be what we would call today content for years and years and years. And that was
Synergy.
So ahead of its time.
Yeah.
I mean, who was thinking that? All the major studios were going, I don't want to go anywhere near TV. It's killing our business.
That was a fascinating factoid that you pulled up, Don, because that had never occurred to me that doing TV was death. Like you could be blacklisted as an actor if you did TV in the 50s. Yeah.
Finding a new job is stressful. But with Indeed, it doesn't have to be. Just fill out your Indeed profile with your skills, experience, and desired salary. The more you fill out, the better your matches will be. And hearing from hiring managers will be 2 times more likely. Relax. That's your Indeed profile sending opportunities your way. Indeed, the world can work better.
As a sports fan, I have to confess. Sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
And wrapping up our trip around the park, we of course have to talk about Tomorrowland, which let's be honest, was one of the more challenging areas of the park, largely because the future has this habit of becoming the past really fast.
Yeah, I have an opening statement, which is Tomorrowland almost didn't open.
Yeah.
It was like for a while, it was like, well, let's just shelve it and we'll open it later. And then, Walt, of course, came around and said, no, we can't do that. We can't say tomorrow's not going to happen. So it was a grab bag of kind of World's Fair grab bag almost of things, but it was somewhat successful. And again, a live action art director, Gabe Scognamillo, came in and designed some really cool architecture and seating and awnings and things that just became mid-century, I think, marvels. And that, along with some very basic things like, Monsanto's bathroom of the bathroom of the future, or the aluminum pavilion, or Circle Vision, which was kind of new. They were able to fill out Tomorrowland in enough of a way way to say, okay, this is what it looks like. But they weren't above saying, hey, we got a big empty space here. Let's put the squid from 20,000 Leagues in for a couple of months. And that ended up staying for years because it was so popular. So again, it was jazz, not classical. They were able to improvise.
That's a great way of saying
There we go.
Oh my God.
It is. They were able to improvise their solutions.
That's what we should have called the chapter. It was jazz, not classical. That's genius.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true, isn't it, though? They improvised their way through it, and it worked somehow.
One of the things that really surprised me was how much Bruce Bushman designed in Tomorrowland, because when we think of Bruce Bushman, we really, and rightfully so, give him tons of credit for Fantasyland. But I was gobsmacked to see how much design development he did for Tomorrowland and Main Street, and some Frontierland as well. But really, so much of Tomorrowland, and Herb Ryman too. I mean, he's known for these big, sweeping, beautiful.
Yeah.
He really even we found early roughs. I know John Hench always gets all the credit for what becomes Space Mountain, but like Ryman does all these like early roughs where he's like he's sketching natural forms, and again, this is why I love rough sketches, because you get into the mind of the artist, and like he's sketching plants and natural organic elements, and then he's doing sketches of like Bryce Canyon kind of forms, and then all of a sudden you start seeing like the ribs of like what becomes Space Mountain like start to develop. This is all part of this Adventures in Science development in the late 50s, early 60s. It's just fascinating to me to think about like what, because everything kind of takes its own weird path, right, to what it eventually becomes. And some of these things die on the vine, and some of these things morph into what we know today.
Speaking of things dying on the vine, we have to talk about
great segue.
The uranium hunt attraction that was proposed for the park. Because
I think we need to tell our listeners we're not drunk. Like this actually happened.
Yeah, we're not making this up. This was a morning in the Walt Disney Archives, who is amazing, and they put a box on a table in front of Chris, and it was a box that had come. That looked like it was from probably Claude Coates when he retired or something like that. So Chris being Chris starts going through it just piece by piece with great detail, which I appreciate. And I'll let him take the story from there, because he let out a gleeful scream like a small child on Christmas morning.
This story gets better every time
and started to pull out these drawings of something that he had heard about. But it expands every time I hear it. Soon he'll be anyway. We'd all heard of the uranium hunt, but it was pretty much fiction. We just had dismissed it as, well, that's stupid. That didn't ever happen. And then Chris finds this drawing that confirmed that it happened.
I'd heard under the vein of the Stouffer's rabbit hole. I'd heard with like-minded folks about this uranium hunt as an attraction, and I thought, well, okay. And then there was a little loose sketch by John Hench for one of these little pods in the entrance to Tomorrowland. And I thought, okay. But I'd always heard Claude Coates had something to do with it. I didn't know what it was. And then Alan Coates, Claude's son, did a book on him, but he didn't do it through the company. So he couldn't do company art. So he just kind of he put the art that was part of what he had at the house that his dad had left. And so all he had from Uranium Hunt was a couple of little I would call them napkin sketches. And they don't really show too many. It was kind of hard to make out what they were. They were literally like scribbles. And I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll never know what Uranium Hunt is. And then, so then they brought this box in to us that literally said Disneyland art. And so we may be wrong. I think because the art, the box is full of, all the airbrushed art, like all the storyboards and all the front, the top and bottom viewport airbrushed art for a Rocket to the Moon. Because I'd always wondered, where's all the Rocket to the Moon art at Imagineering? It's in this box. It's incredible. So what I think, I might be wrong, but what I think is, when Claude Coates retired and cleaned out his office, he probably took all this art and put it in this box and gave it to Dave Smith. And then it just kind of got filed away and just kind of, didn't really get archived. For whatever reason. It's
in the archives.
It's got Journey to a Drop of Water, those Herb Ryman roughs I was mentioning before. And so at the very bottom are like 6 or 7 of these drawings of what turns out to be Uranium Hunt, which made me lose my mind because I never thought I'd see it. And then we did find a couple memos talking about the project. So what was Uranium Hunt for your guests, to cut to the chase? Uranium Hunt was an attraction that was going to go about out where the yacht club was, which is the F&B, the restaurant that has the bandstand that rises up in Tomorrowland. So about there, and it's all southwestern rock work, which is very strange because it's Tomorrowland, so it doesn't really belong there. But it's all this southwestern rock work.
Sure.
And you're walking around outside, and they handed you Geiger counters. And basically, because you were going to measure, they had radioactive uranium embedded in the rockwork that you were going to measure as you worked your way through this path with all these gags and things to see. And then if you didn't get enough of a healthy green glow from that, at the very end of the attraction, they would hand you a souvenir piece of uranium to take home with you. So thank God cooler heads prevailed, and they did not do this. But what's really interesting is if you get into it, studying the gags, Coates repurposes about two-thirds of them into Rainbow Caverns Mine Train in about a few months when they execute on that. So again, it's the same thing of, well, here's all these ideas. We're not going to do uranium hunt. Let's do them in Rainbow Caverns Mine Train. So that kind of stuff is fascinating to me because I feel like, for me, these books, back to what I was saying before about, I want to try my best if I can. I feel like at the end of the day, like I don't like people care what Don has to say. People don't care what I have to say. But what people really care about is they want to jump in their time machine and they want to go back to 1956 and they want to be in a conference room and be a fly on the wall where Walt comes in and talks to Claude Coates and goes, Claude, I was thinking about this uranium thing, and we're gonna do this thing, and I go, okay, and why don't you do some drawings? And it could be, right? Like that's what we all want. Like we want to hear what the conversation was, and unfortunately, because animation, has had stenographers in the meetings, and so you've got meeting notes, these wonderful notes where Walt and all the animators are participating. You don't have that with Imagineering with WED. So you're really trying to retcon and figure out from these memos when projects were approved. There's not a lot out there, which is why you don't have a lot of specificity and a lot of guessing as to what happened when and then you're dealing with memories of people who were in their 70s and 80s at the end of their life, basically trying to remember what they were doing at that time. So this is why it's all kind of loosey-goosey.
Yeah. It's what he was saying. It's really what kind of drove the book, is trying to bring that period to life, not only with Walt, but the people that worked with him. And I think ending Tomorrowland with 1967 and kind of the opening of the new Tomorrowland meant a lot of sense to us, because I didn't realize how much Walt's fingerprints were all over that thing. And everybody who kind of helped form Disneyland was there to get that Tomorrowland in place. And sadly, he didn't live to see it. But what a bittersweet time that must have been.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks so much for coming on the Disney Dish. But again, just to circle back to where we began tonight, we're this week actually celebrating Disneyland's 70th anniversary. And if you want to give yourself a present for this anniversary, you need to get a copy of The Happiest Place on Earth, the incredible story of Walt Disney's Disneyland. And if you're looking for dessert, the Knott's Berry Tales book, also a delight.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. I mean, it's like I was a big Knott's Berry Tales fan, and it was my daughter's favorite ride.
Where do I send the check?
We'll all be sending a check to you. That's Chris Merritt.
Free, man. We're doing this one for free.
There we go.
Thanks.
Yeah, but congratulations on this book, though, guys. It is an instant classic. It's going to be one of the key references we use for the next 50 years.
Well, thank you.
Thanks. That means a lot. Jim, I've known you for a long time, and it's coming from you guys. That means the world to us, and we're really glad that you enjoyed it.
Terrific.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for the show today. You can help support our show by subscribing over at patreon.com/JimHillMedia, where we're posting exclusive shows every week. Our latest show is The Wild Expansion Plans of Disney MGM Studios. And there's a link to it in the show notes. Thanks again to Chris and Don for being on the show. On next week's show, Jim finishes up the history of the Jack Sparrow and Barbossa characters to the Pirates of the Caribbean rides in Disney parks. You can find more of Jim at JimHillMedia.com and more of me, Len at TouringPlans.com. We're produced spectacularly by Eric Hersey and David Gray, who'll be reciting their new works titled She Lassoed My Heart and Stole My Cattle And it's the whiskey talking, darling, but let's hear what it has to say. At the Montana Jim is cracking up right now. It's making me laugh. At the Montana Cowboy Poetry Gathering and Western Music Rendezvous, running Thursday, August 7th through Sunday, August 10th, 2025, at the Fergus High School. That's off Casino Creek Drive in beautiful downtown Lewiston, Montana. While Eric and David are doing that, please go onto iTunes and rate our show and tell us what you'd like to hear next. For Jim, this is Len. We'll see you on the next show.